So in my 20s, I had my first real professional grown-up job, and I was the kind of girl in the workplace where I wore my heart on my sleeve. I was pretty expressive, I was pretty well liked. And then I got pregnant when I was 30, and I was expecting my first baby, and I shared that pregnancy. Of course, you can't hide it with your workplace. So as the months went on, I got bigger and bigger, and my workplace threw me one of those god-awful baby showers with those big cards that you used to get back in the 90s. So they sent me off on my way. But very sadly, my baby died at full term in labour, and this was a sudden and unexpected, shocking grief. And I was in the hospital on the day of his birth and his death with my family and friends. And I remember lying in that hospital bed, and it suddenly occurred to me that I had to call my boss. And it really got me in the throat. So I picked up the phone and I rang my workplace, and the first person that answered was Trang, the receptionist. And of course she said, "Have you had the baby yet?" And even more of a lump in my throat came. And with a shaky hand, I said, "Could you just put me through to Vari, please," who was my manager. So I got Vari on the phone, and I said to her, "I'm really sorry, Vari, but my baby just died." And of course, it hit her like a ton of bricks. And so she didn't say too much in that time, but she did say, "I'm going to call you back in 5 minutes." So I think what she did at that time was to just catch her breath, and she rang me straight back, and she asked me some basic facts about how it happened, what had happened. And she said, "I'm going to come and see you in the hospital," which she did. And so she came by the next morning. 2 days later, I went home, and I actually went home with my baby. We had a 3-day vigil with my family and my friends. And my boss came, and my 2 closest friends, Beth and Helen, came from my workplace, and they sat with me. And within that week, I started to have some conversations with my boss around how I wanted the broader team to be informed. And we just really explored that together. She had never navigated this experience before. I certainly had never navigated this experience before. 6 weeks later, after my maternity leave had come to an end, I had to go back to work. I remember getting in those lifts and going up to level 1 and level 2 and level 3. And the doors opened, and there's the reception desk and a whole world behind that desk that I no longer related to. But with a deep breath, I walked past that reception, I went back into that world. And I stumbled a lot in those first few days. But there was something about that experience, or those first few days, that was okay. I was able to bear. And looking back on it now, I realised that there were some things that happened that I wasn't aware of at the time. And what had happened was, yes, the communications went out because I had a conversation with my boss about it. But also what she did was she took my closest friends to one side and she said, "You can go and talk with Jess or take her out for a coffee whenever it looks like she needs a little bit of extra support." She also said to the whole team in a private email, "I have an open door policy." We had one member of the team who was just about to become a grandmother, and she was afraid of what it was going to be like for her when Jessie came back to work. So she went in and was able to have conversations with the boss around what this brought up for her. My boss went and spoke to the CEO, her boss, and said, "Oh, I hope we're doing this right, this is bringing up some stuff for me," and that CEO was able to give her that time and space. So a lot happened to make that workplace grief literate. There was a lot of stumbling through, but there was a lot of knowledge and skills that people were able to draw on. What a lesson in leadership, in compassionate leadership. And I guess now when I think about what we're up for in our workplaces, we talk about well-being, we talk about compassion, we talk about bringing your whole self to work. What we want to do now is create space for those courageous conversations, those skilled conversations, those natural, normal, practical conversations for people going through grief, because we will all go through a grief of our own, either someone we love, a child, a parent, a grandparent, a pet, a cat, a dog, a duck, or we're going to go through some massive experience in our life which has really shifted our sense of meaning around things. So we need to make space for these conversations.